G'day, I'm Dylan. I'm currently on tour with Northlane and we're at the Forum here in Melbourne. Today and on this tour I'm using the D-Live S5000 console, which is really nice. I'm used to using the C1500, which is about this size, so having the extra kind of fader banks and the couple of screens are making it really easy to work through the changes and stuff that the bands are doing throughout the set. I thought today I'd spend a bit of time going through my workflow on the console and showing you my routing methods and the types of things that I'm automating throughout the show. All of the live band stuff is summed into a band bus, and in addition to that I also have all of the kind of backing track related synth stuff, including John's push and those kinds of things, summed into a track bus. And I've also got the vocal plus all of the vocal effects all summed into a vocal bus. Now these are my three masters, so I've got the band, the track and the vocals all summing into the master bus. Mostly all of my channels are summed through subgroups and then onto the master bus chain. Most of my processing inside the channels has got to do with corrective EQ, gating and the like, and most of my compression happens on the subgroup layer or the master bus layer. So if I run through my drums as an example, I've got kick in and kick out, snare top and bottom, my toms and all of my cymbals. These all run into subgroups for each of those groups of drums. So kick subgroup, snare subgroup, tom subgroup and cymbal subgroup. These all run out to my UAD live rack and are processed accordingly and then brought back into the console post that. All of these are then summed and then run into my master drum bus, which has a parallel compression API on it. Bass is summed into a subgroup, guitars are also summed into a subgroup, and each of these are affected in UAD. And all of those are combined into a master band bus. And a little bit of compression happens on the band bus, but not a lot. It's maybe only a dB or two at any one point of compression happening. So overall, there's not a lot of compression happening on individual channels, but I like to kind of step up my compression through the subgroup routing process. So on the subgroup layer for kick and snare, for example, I have a bit of compression. On the drum group, I have parallel compression. On the band group, I've got just a little bit of compression. And then that goes into the master bus chain, which again has just a little bit of compression on it. So nothing's being slammed. Everything's just getting a few dB taken off here and there for overall control. And you know, kind of squishes everything in nice and tight towards the end for the master bus chain. In addition to this, I have a fair bit of automation going on the console. One thing that the Allen Heath is great at is receiving MIDI fired from some other external device, and this being able to trigger things like scenes and mutes and that kind of thing. So my scene menu here is quite populated. I've got up to around about 128 scenes that are fired automatically throughout the show via automation. And most of the things that I'm going to be controlling here are overall level changes, such as the band up and down, the drums up and down, and there might be minute changes in the snapshots that are happening. I'll also be using them to trigger not only effects, so slap effects and delay effects and that kind of thing, but also the level and the timing of these effects. Snapshots are also used to trigger certain effects that I've got running on Waves sound grid. Now I don't have a lot of processing going on in sound grid, but mainly just my vocal channel is what I run through there, and it's mainly to use some of the cool effects that Waves has, such as vocoders and distortions and those kinds of things that are automatically triggered or mark as vocal throughout the set. The other thing that's great in terms of MIDI control with the console is that not only have I got the console being controlled by an external MIDI device, I've actually got MIDI control faders set up on the console to trigger other things externally. So for example, if I press this button here on the console, it's going to automatically bring up H delay on Waves, and with these fader controls, I can control things like the feedback and the delay rate and that kind of stuff that I end up kind of doing manually throughout the show to create some wild kind of delay feedback effects and that kind of stuff that really kind of integrates well with their music. So on my master bus chain, I'm using just a little bit of compression overall. So I use the Shadow Hills mastering compressor. This is really glues everything together. And again, it's kind of like it's two compressors in serial. We've got an optical compressor first, and then another compressor afterwards. Each of them, again, only doing about a dB or 2 of gain reduction overall. Just to kind of glue the whole lot together. And most of the time, this is going to be pumping on things like the kick and the snare. In particular, the snare is usually what I find is the loudest thing in the mix. People always ask me about my snare kind of processing chain, and it just hits the compressor on every level. So on the snare subgroup, on the drum subgroup, on the band subgroup, on the master subgroup, it's all just getting a little bit of compression over all of that. And then after it has the master bus compression applied, it also runs through an Oxford inflator. So kick and snare generally are clipped at this point, adding a little bit of distortion and kind of, again, gluing them into the mix, bringing the peak levels right down and creating that kind of bit of distortion on the kick and snare so it just melds in with everything else. And it keeps my mix level really consistent overall. So you won't ever usually see anything jumping up over, whatever the peak level is here, it's +6. Throughout the whole set, most of the peak levels are going to be sitting at that level, and it's kind of quite squashed and tight overall. So previously to this tour, I was using QLab to fire my scenes, so for all the MIDI automation stuff. And over the course of January, I went through and adapted all of that and all of the cues that I had previously to Reaper. I've found that Reaper is a much better editor for firing MIDI cues by timecode. And the reason why compared to QLab is that it's a timeline-based editor. QLab is a command line-based editor, and it doesn't give you the flexibility in terms of the timeline process. For example, grabbing a bunch of the cues and sliding them across the timeline. It's made it a breeze to edit and add in all of these new cues, particularly where you can reference something like, a click track or something visually, a waveform, some kind of waveform that allows you to, butt all of these cues up against. So it's kind of been a little bit of kind of starting from scratch. I have worked with the cues that I've had previously and recorded them in, but it has taken me a bit of time to rebuild, but I think overall it's going to be a much better workflow that's going to future-proof this setup a lot more than how it was set up previously.